The officers were looking for volunteers to go on a dangerous mission, and if they survived, the soldiers would be allowed to go home. Because he wanted to go home as quickly as possible, he volunteered. But the men who volunteered had no idea what they were in for. All they knew was that it was a dangerous mission, and it was their ticket home. Nolan was one of 3,000 men who were selected to become members of the 5,300th Composite Unit Provisional, Merrill's Marauders. After completing additional training, they arrived in India through Bombay. Because most of the area is jungle, they traveled primarily on foot, with a backpack and with mules which carried additional loads. They carried no artillery support. When they trekked through narrow and winding paths on steep mountains, in which the mules were supposed to carry the load but could not, the soldiers carried the load themselves and led the mules. Their objective was to capture and hold an airfield in Burma, critical to the war effort. To do this, they had to destroy the Japanese resistance that stood between them and their objective. The Marauders were on their feet for about 1,000 miles, from their landing point in Bombay to the airfield in Burma. They went through jungles, steep mountain climbs, and dealt with jungle diseases such as malaria, typhus, and dysentery, as well as physical ailments. It took them 4 months to reach the airfield and to take it. The combat teams were supplied as often as needed by airdrops from C-47 airport planes. But sometimes the drops would not reach them or would fall to the enemy, and they would be without sufficient food for a few days. They also had to deal with hunger every now and then. Nonetheless, they continued their march. They engaged the enemy in 5 major battles and about 30 minor skirmishes. They were outnumbered by a superior, well-trained enemy force with better weaponry. They lost many men, but they did not leave anyone behind to fall into the hands of the enemy. The Marauders persisted and eventually captured the airfield. Nolan later became seriously ill with typhus. He was evacuated to a staging base in India and was eventually returned to the United States. He was discharged from the Army in Fort Billings, Massachusetts. The Merrill Marauders had volunteered for a dangerous and hazardous mission with no idea of what the risks were, where they were going, and whether they would survive the mission. But they volunteered because their nation had asked them to do so, and they did so to free the world of tyranny. They were outnumbered, they were outgunned, they met overwhelming attacks, but their courage and fortitude never wavered. They had no vehicles, no artillery. They had only their feet to go over 1,000 miles. They had to use machetes to cut paths through thick jungles, at times while dealing with the enemy. They had to carry the bags that the mules were supposed to carry, but the mules could not carry them on steep and winding treks. They had to endure ravaging diseases of malaria, typhus, and dysentery. They had to endure monsoons that slowed them down. They also had to endure extreme heat and exhaustion. They even had to endure hunger when our transport planes misdropped food and other supplies for them. But they did it. They did it because their service was essential to turn the tide against the enemy. The legacy of Merrill's Marauders is of legendary distinction. Their record of courage and fortitude is viewed as the epitome of military service, setting standards that inspire current members of the military. Indeed, their service laid the foundation for the establishment of today's United States 75th Ranger Regiment. It is certainly right and proper that Merrill's Marauders be celebrated for what they did for our country. Fred Nolan should likewise be celebrated for his service with honor, courage, and fortitude, and we do so today. As members of St. Peter, Prince of the Apostles Catholic Church, my family and Peggy and I got to meet and know Fred and his wife Rita and their family through the church activities and in attending Mass. His grandchildren and my children also attended Los Angeles schools, and they knew each other. When he and I would greet each other, whether around here or elsewhere. He would always address me as Your Honor in his Boston-like accent, and forgive me for that bad rendition of his accent. He was a warm, friendly person, almost always with a smile on his face. He was not pretentious, nor bragged about his military service, of which I was unaware of until a couple of weeks or so ago, when Fred asked me to participate in this event. He was a good and humble man who loved his family, his country, and his faith. As a family member of several brothers who served in the military, and of our own son who served in the U.S. Army as a captain and who served in Iraq and Afghanistan on several deployments, we can appreciate what the family went through when Nolan was overseas. I would like to close with a prayer that the chaplain at the virtual ceremony gave in closing, with appropriate liberties on my part. Thank you, Almighty Father, for Fred Nolan. He served our nation as a dedicated soldier who helped lay the mighty foundation of freedom upon which we stand today. His selfless service rendered to a grateful nation honors your call for us to love one another. You imbued him with courage, character, and commitment to live the values you established. Since codified in the Ranger Creed, he and other Marauders moved further than any dismounted ground force. They energetically met and defeated the enemies of our country. They did not leave a single fallen comrade to fall in the hands of the enemy. We are grateful for the families and the leaders you blessed to form the men in a cohesive team, trained and disciplined and fit to win on the battlefield. Bless Fred and his family, as well as all the Merrill's, Marauders, and their families in our nation. Keep the lamp of liberty shining forth brightly across our nation, and let it always serve as a beacon of hope to all freedom-loving people. It is in your holy, majestic, magnificent, and mighty name that I pray. Amen. I now have the privilege and the honor to formally present to Fred Martin a bronze replica of the